Expelled from her home in the middle of a storm, a pregnant woman fights for her life, while the man who promised to protect her tries to erase her from his own history. When the video of the assault goes viral, the entire country turns against the power that always silenced her. But she returns, not for revenge, but to bring down the empire of the man who almost killed her. If you like stories like this, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment saying where you're listening from. The rain lashed down on Kensington with an unusual fury for that March night. Forks of lightning tore through the London sky, while the icy wind rattled the trees in the garden of the Maxwell mansion. From inside the house came the sound of crystal breaking against the wall, followed by deafening screams that competed with the roar of thunder. Victoria Rivers staggered across the soaked lawn, one hand protectively over her 7-month belly, the other trying to wipe away the blood streaming from her eyebrow. Her bare feet sank into the mud as the rain diluted the tears running down her face. Her white nightgown, now transparent and stained red, clung to her trembling body. "Never come back, you useless woman," Edward Maxwell's voice echoed from the mansion door. "You and that bastard are no longer my problem." Victoria didn't look back. She stumbled through the gardens until she reached the main gate. The security guards, who used to call her Madam, now averted their gaze, as if they didn't recognize her, as if they didn't see a wounded, pregnant woman before them. Orders from the boss. No one would dare defy him. The moment she stepped through the gate, the sharp sound of a military helicopter cut through the sky between the thunderclaps. Lights flickered above her for an instant, like a premonition, before disappearing into the storm. Victoria stumbled along the sidewalk of the upscale neighborhood, barefoot, feeling every stone and irregularity under her injured feet. 2 years earlier, everything seemed like a fairy tale. Victoria had just returned to the UK after 3 years serving as a nurse in the British Army Medical Corps, including 6 months on a UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti. The horrors she witnessed there left deep marks, and she sought to rebuild her life in a peaceful environment. It was during the welcome party organized by her military colleagues at a London nightclub that she met Edward Maxwell. Tall, elegant, and with an irresistible smile, he approached her, offering a glass of champagne and a compliment that made her blush. "A woman who saves lives deserves to be treated like a queen," he had said, with those brown eyes that seemed sincere, almost vulnerable. Edward was the CEO of Maxwell Tech, one of the country's most promising technology companies, specializing in security software. At 38, he was considered one of London's most coveted bachelors, intelligent, charismatic, and, according to Forbes UK magazine, one of the most influential businessmen of the new generation. Their first date was at the Shard, a renowned rooftop bar with panoramic views overlooking Hyde Park. Edward picked her up in a helicopter, landing on the helipad of the building where she lived with her cousin. "I've always wanted to meet someone who truly cares about others, not just money and status," he confessed during dinner as they admired the city lights. "You're different, Victoria. Your gaze has a depth I don't find in people in my circle." His words warmed Victoria's heart, tired of seeing so much pain and suffering. Edward seemed to value exactly who she was, a woman dedicated to caring for others, strong enough to face battlefields, but still dreamy enough to believe in love. In just 3 months, she moved into his mansion. In 6, she was wearing an engagement ring with a diamond that reflected light almost blindingly. The proposal happened on a helipad on Oxford Street, with the city at their feet, and a future that seemed bright before her. "You brought color into my life, Victoria. I never want to spend another day without you." The wedding ceremony at the Savoy gathered the London elite and was featured in celebrity magazines. Victoria, orphaned since adolescence, finally felt she had found her place in the world, her family. The first signs emerged subtly. Edward suggested she leave the army to dedicate herself to more important projects. When she mentioned working in a civilian hospital, he argued there was no financial need and that she deserved rest after years of military service. "You can dedicate yourself to social projects, darling. As my wife, you'll have more impact as a patroness than as a simple nurse." Gradually, his suggestions turned into decisions. Her wardrobe was revamped. "These clothes no longer suit your new social position. Her military friends were gradually pushed away. That sergeant is too rude for our circles. Even her diet began to be controlled. I'm worried about your health. I've hired a nutritionist. What seemed like care and love was in fact control. Edward was meticulous in every detail of their lives. At first, Victoria interpreted it as dedication, as the desire of someone who never had a structured family to create a perfect home. He had briefly mentioned a difficult childhood with an absent father and a mother struggling with alcoholism before making his fortune with his tech company. One Sunday afternoon, while Edward was in an emergency meeting, Victoria found, in the false bottom of his office drawer, old photos of a family in a simple house in rural Oxfordshire. There was a boy with sad eyes next to a thin, haggard woman. Behind the photo, the inscription, "Edward, 10 years old, Oxfordshire." When he returned and found her with the photos, his face transformed into a mask of fury. For the first time she saw that look that would later become so familiar. "You have no right to meddle in my things. This is an invasion of privacy." The scream echoed through the mansion walls. In seconds he composed himself, took a deep breath, and forced a tense smile. "Sorry, darling. These memories bring me pain." That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, an emerald necklace awaited her with breakfast, along with a card apologizing for his inappropriate behavior. The pattern was established: outbursts of rage followed by expensive gifts and periods of apparent remorse. Over time, the intervals between episodes shortened and the outbursts intensified. The apologies became less sincere, the gifts more ostentatious, as if they could buy her silence and submission. 6 months after the wedding, during a dinner with investors, Victoria casually mentioned her desire to go back to studying, perhaps a specialization in trauma nursing. In front of the guests, Edward smiled and raised his glass in a toast. "To my wife, who has so many talents, she doesn't even need to worry about work or studies." Later, at home, he squeezed her arm hard enough to leave marks. "Don't embarrass me in front of my partners. You are Edward Maxwell's wife, not just any nurse. Behave as such." It was the first physical aggression, disguised as a firm squeeze to emphasize the seriousness of the conversation. Victoria found herself wearing long sleeves the next day, despite the summer heat in London. Gradually, the circle closed around her. Security cameras installed for protection monitored every movement. The driver, who took her everywhere, reported every stop to Edward. Her cell phone was updated regularly with new apps that, she suspected, tracked her location and messages. The woman who had cared for wounded soldiers in conflict zones now had to ask permission to visit the mall. The nurse who had faced epidemics in Haiti now trembled at the sound of Edward's car arriving home. One night, while dining on the balcony overlooking the illuminated city, Edward mentioned almost casually, "Did you know I can see everything you do on your phone? Every message, every search, every photo. It's fascinating what technology allows nowadays." He smiled, cutting a piece of filet mignon, as if he had commented on the weather, not on the complete invasion of her privacy. That same night, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The pharmacy test showed 2 clear, defined lines. Her first thought was joy. A baby. A real family. Maybe this would change Edward, bring back the man she had fallen in love with. Her second thought was fear. A child would mean a permanent bond with Edward. It would mean more control, more possibility of manipulation. It would mean that escaping, if ever necessary, would be infinitely more complicated. With trembling hands, she put the test in her robe pocket. She needed to process that information before sharing it with her husband. She needed a plan, clarity. When she finally told Edward 3 days later, his reaction was disconcerting. He showed no joy, no anger, just a calculated indifference, as if she had informed him about the weather forecast. A child. Of course, it was to be expected eventually. He continued to review documents on his laptop without looking at her. "Take care of your health. I don't want complications." That night, for the first time since she had met him, Victoria cried herself to sleep, feeling a profound loneliness despite her husband's body lying beside her, his back to her, absorbed in his phone. In the following months, the pregnancy advanced, as did Edward's distance. He spent more and more nights away, claiming meetings, business trips, unavoidable commitments. The different feminine perfume on his shirts became frequent, as did the calls he answered in a low voice, locked in his office. Victoria clung to the hope that, when the baby was born, everything would change, that Edward would see his child and rediscover the love, compassion, and humanity she believed existed beneath that mask of coldness and control. This fragile hope was what kept her going day after day in a house that seemed more like a gilded cage, a hope that, like the storm now lashing, London was about to flood everything in its path, leaving only destruction or perhaps purification in its wake. The bouquet of red roses arrived on a sunny Tuesday in August. Victoria, 6 months pregnant, observed the sumptuous arrangement with a sense of strangeness. Edward hadn't sent flowers in months. In fact, they barely spoke beyond what was strictly necessary. "A gift from Dr. Maxwell for Madam," the maid informed her, placing the vase on the coffee table. Victoria approached the flowers looking for a card. The small lilac envelope didn't have the logo of the florist Edward usually used. Inside, a handwritten note. "Thank you for another unforgettable night. I look forward to our future together. With love, Sophia." Her world stopped. The words danced before her eyes, blurred by tears. Sophia. The name seemed familiar. Then she remembered. Sophia Preston, the new financial director of Edward's company, an elegant 32-year-old woman he had hired 6 months ago. That afternoon, Victoria did something she hadn't done in a long time. She made a decision on her own. She dressed discreetly, jeans that still fit under her growing belly, a loose t-shirt and a baseball cap to hide part of her face. She took out the old cell phone she kept hidden in a shoebox, the one Edward didn't know existed, a gift from her cousin Louisa during their last clandestine visit. "If you need help, call me on this phone. He won't be able to track it," Louisa had whispered, worried about the bruises Victoria was trying to hide with makeup. Victoria called a taxi using the app installed on her secret phone. To the driver, she gave the address of Maxwell Tech's headquarters in Canary Wharf. Sitting in the back seat, she took deep breaths, trying to control the tremor in her hands, and the nausea she couldn't tell if was from pregnancy or fear. Upon arriving at the imposing glass and steel building, she parked at a cafe across the street. From there, she could observe the main entrance without being noticed. She ordered chamomile tea and waited, her eyes fixed on the revolving door through which employees and visitors entered and exited. 4 hours later, as the sky began to darken, Edward emerged in the lobby, accompanied by a dark-haired woman with an elegant posture. Sophia Preston, Victoria recognized immediately. The two didn't show public affection. Edward was always discreet, but the intimacy between them was noticeable in the way he leaned slightly towards her when speaking, how their hands occasionally touched as they walked side by side. They got into Edward's car, a black Audi with tinted windows. Victoria quickly paid for her tea and called another taxi, instructing the driver to follow the Audi, keeping a distance. "Trouble with the husband, miss?" asked the taxi driver, a grey-haired gentleman who observed her in the rearview mirror with a sympathetic look. "I just need to confirm some suspicions," she replied, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. The Audi drove towards Mayfair, parking in front of a high-end residential building. Edward and Sophia entered together, greeting the doorman with familiarity. Victoria asked the taxi driver to wait, paid an hour in advance, and crossed the street. In the building's lobby, she approached the reception with a rehearsed story. "Good evening. I'm Sophia Preston's cousin, and I forgot which apartment she's in. Can you help me?" The doorman, a young man in his 20s, hesitated. "Miss Preston just went up with Mr. Maxwell to 1201. Would you like me to announce you?" "No, thank you. I'll surprise her later. She's expecting a gift I left in the taxi." Victoria returned to the vehicle and asked the driver to take her home. During the ride, a storm of emotions raged inside her. The confirmation of the betrayal was no surprise, but seeing it with her own eyes made everything painfully real. That night, Edward didn't come home. He sent a message saying he needed to travel for work to Brighton. The lie was now obvious, almost insulting. Victoria spent the night awake, planning her next steps. In the morning she made another decision. She would return to Sophia's building. This time she dressed more carefully. A loose dress that partially disguised her pregnancy, dark glasses, hair tied in a discreet bun. Again by taxi, she arrived in Mayfair around 10 a.m. "Delivery for 12:01, she told the same doorman, showing a small gift box she had bought on the way. "You can leave it with me, madam. I'll deliver it when Ms. Preston returns." "She's not there. She left early with Mr. Maxwell. They should be back for lunch. They always have lunch here on Wednesdays." The information was valuable and de-established routine. Victoria thanked him, said she would return later, and left, feeling a growing determination replace her initial despair. The following week, on Wednesday, Victoria returned to the building. This time she arrived at 11:30 a.m., knowing the couple would return for lunch. She positioned herself in a bookstore overlooking the entrance, distractedly flipping through a book on pregnancy, an irony that did not go unnoticed. At precisely noon, the Audi parked. Edward and Sophia entered the building, now showing more affection, he with his hand on her waist, she laughing at something he had whispered in her ear. Victoria waited 15 minutes and crossed the street. She approached the doorman, a different one, a middle-aged gentleman. "Good morning. I'm Martha from Health Plus Clinic. I have a home consultation scheduled with Ms. Sophia Preston, apartment 1201. Ms. Preston didn't mention any medical visit today. It's an emergency consultation. She called this morning complaining of abdominal pain. Dr. Maxwell is aware. He himself requested urgency." The mention of Edward's name had an effect. The doorman hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll announce you." "Please don't worry. I just spoke with them. They're expecting me." With a confidence she didn't know she possessed, Victoria headed for the elevator. Her heart pounded, her palms sweaty. She was about to confront not just betrayal, but years of manipulation and abuse. On the 12th floor, she walked down the silent corridor until she found door 1201. She didn't knock. Instead, she pressed her ear to the wood, trying to catch sounds from inside. The voices were muffled, but distinguishable. Edward spoke in a serious tone, while Sophia responded with an occasional laugh. Victoria took her phone from her pocket and opened the recording app, holding it near the door. "Don't worry about her," Edward was saying. "Divorce isn't an option now. It would be a scandal and affect the company's shares. We need to be strategic." "What about the baby?" Sophia's voice sounded worried. "A temporary problem. There are discreet doctors who can take care of that after the birth. An accident, a sudden complication. These things happen. What if she suspects something? Victoria? She's not capable of that. She's completely dependent on me, financially, emotionally. No family, few friends, no career, but I shaped her that way. When it's all over, I'll get custody of the baby, a widowed father dedicated to business and his child. A touching story for the media. And us? We'll wait for the appropriate time, a year, maybe 2. Then the widowed CEO finds comfort in the arms of his dedicated financial director. A new family rises from the ashes of tragedy. The laugh that followed was cold, calculating, devoid of any humanity. Victoria felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. Her son kicked in her womb as if he too sensed the danger. With trembling fingers, she ended the recording and immediately sent it to Louisa's email, her cousin. The only person she fully trusted. She added a message. "Keep this. If anything happens to me, hand it over to the authorities." As she moved away from the door, Victoria bumped into a decorative vase in the corridor. The sound of ceramic breaking echoed through the silent environment. The door to 1201 opened abruptly. Edward appeared, wearing only dress trousers, his chest bare. His eyes widened as he recognized his wife. "Victoria, what on earth are you doing here?" Sophia appeared behind him, wrapped in a sheet, her face a mask of surprise and embarrassment. Victoria took a step back, aware of the vulnerability of her position. "I know everything, Edward. About you two, about your plans." For a moment his face registered genuine shock, quickly replaced by a calculating expression she knew well. Edward assessing the situation, planning his next move. "You're confused, darling. His voice took on the condescending tone he used when he wanted to make her doubt herself. "The pregnancy is affecting your hormones, creating paranoia. Let's go home. We'll talk there." He extended his hand as if offering help to a lost child. Victoria looked at that hand, the same one that had caressed her, then assaulted her and now planned to silence her permanently. "No." The word came out firm, surprising them both. "It's over, Edward. I have proof of your threats, of your plan. It's all recorded." His expression instantly transformed. The mask of concern fell, revealing a glacial fury that made Victoria instinctively recoil. "You recorded me, you stupid bitch!" He lunged, grabbing her arm with enough force to leave marks. "Give me that phone now!" Sophia, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to intervene. "Edward, calm down. Not here, the neighbors might hear." He ignored her, focused on Victoria, who struggled to free herself. With a sudden movement, he pushed her against the wall, making her hit her head. Stars danced before her eyes. "The phone, now." His voice was a furious hiss. Victoria, dizzy, handed over the device, knowing that the recording was already safe in Louisa's email. Edward checked the phone, realizing there was nothing there. It was the monitored phone, not the secret device she had used to record and that remained hidden in her pocket. "Where's the recording?" he demanded. "I've already sent it to trusted people," Victoria lied, praying he would believe her. "If anything happens to me or my child, the police will know exactly where to look." A quick calculation passed through Edward's eyes. He released her arm, taking a step back. "Sophia, give me a minute with my wife." The mistress hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the violence she had witnessed. "Edward, I think it's better if—" "Now!" The shout made both women jump. Sophia retreated into the apartment, closing the door softly. In the corridor, Edward and Victoria faced each other, he furious. She determined not to show the fear that gnawed at her insides. "You have no idea what a mistake you just made," he said, his voice controlled again, which frightened her even more. "Do you really think you can threaten me? I built an empire from nothing. I destroyed competitors far more powerful than you." "I'm not threatening. I'm protecting myself and my child." "Our child," he corrected, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My heir. The only thing of yours that has any value to me." His words hit Victoria like a physical punch. The explicit cruelty without any pretense of affection confirmed everything she feared. This was not a moment of fleeting anger. It was the true face of the man she had married. "I'm leaving, Edward, today. We don't need to make this any harder." He laughed, a cold, calculated sound. "Leaving for where, Victoria? To what loving family? To what brilliant career? To what loyal friends? I made sure you had none of that. You don't exist outside my shadow." His words highlighted a painful truth. In the past 2 years, Edward had systematically isolated her, pushing away everyone who could offer support, sabotaging every attempt at independence. "I have Louisa. My cousin never stopped looking for me, even when you tried to push her away." "Louisa," he raised an eyebrow, amused. "The same Louisa who accepted that convenient job in Manchester. What an interesting coincidence, don't you think? As if anyone could refuse a salary 3 times what the market offers." Victoria felt her blood run cold. Edward had manipulated even that? Bought the estrangement of the only family she had left? "You're bluffing. Call her. Find out if she's still in the UK. His smile widened as he saw the doubt on her face. "Come on, Victoria. Use that brain that was once so promising. Why? Do you think I got everything I have? I plan, I execute, I eliminate obstacles. You're just another logistical problem to be solved." A movement in Victoria's womb reminded her of what was truly at stake. It wasn't just her freedom or dignity. It was her child's life, threatened by his own father. "I'm going home now," she said with a calm she didn't feel. "We need to talk with cool heads." Edward studied her for a moment, evaluating whether she posed a real threat. Apparently satisfied with her submission, he nodded. "My driver will take you. I'll be back later, and we'll have a long talk about loyalty and consequences." In the car, as the silent driver took her back to the mansion in Kensington, Victoria felt her world collapse and rebuild simultaneously. The fear was still there, pulsating, but now there was something more, a determination born of the instinct for survival. The military nurse who had faced war zones began to emerge beneath the facade of the submissive wife. She needed a plan. She needed allies. She needed to escape before Edward returned. At the mansion, she went straight to the master bedroom. She opened the immense closet and grabbed a small suitcase, hiding it under the bed. Then she separated important documents: marriage certificate, ID card, prenatal care card, joint bank account statements. In Edward's password-protected office, she knew she would find crucial information. Using his mother's birth date, the only sentimentality he allowed himself, she managed to unlock his personal computer. Victoria was not a computer expert, but 3 years attending wounded soldiers had taught her to be methodical and observant. She found emails between Edward and a doctor, discreetly discussing postpartum procedures and induced complications. She found substantial transfers to a Cayman Islands account under the name Project Phoenix, the same codename he and Sophia had mentioned in the recorded conversation. She printed everything that seemed important, organizing the documents in a folder. She thought of Louisa. Could it be true that Edward had intentionally pushed her away? She tried to call her cousin's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Time was running out. Edward would return soon, probably earlier than promised, suspicious of her intentions. Victoria knew she needed to get out of the mansion as soon as possible, but where would she go? Who would believe? That one of London's most respected businessmen planned to cause his own wife's death. The answer came like a flash. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Adams, her former superior in the army, now working at the military hospital. An honorable man who had always treated her with respect and trust. Victoria took out her secret phone and dialed the number she still kept in memory. Colonel Adams. Michael, it's Victoria Rivers. Do you remember me? The nurse who served in Haiti under your command. Victoria. Of course I remember. How are you? I heard you married that businessman, Maxwell. Yes, Michael, I'm in danger. I need urgent help. There was a pause, then his voice became serious, professional. Explain the situation, soldier. In brief words, Victoria recounted her situation: the abusive marriage, the pregnancy, the discovery of Edward's plans, the incriminating recording. Where are you now? He asked. At the mansion in Kensington, but he'll be back soon. I'm afraid of what he might do when he realizes I intend to leave him. Listen carefully. Gather only the essentials: documents, money, medicines. I'll send someone to pick you up in an hour. A discreet car, no military identification. The password will be Operation Rescue. Can you be ready? Yes. For the first time in months, Victoria felt genuine hope. Don't use the phone, he monitors. Keep a low profile until we arrive. Thank you, Michael. Thank me when you're safe, soldier. Now, focus on the mission. The call ended. Victoria felt a wave of relief, immediately followed by adrenaline. 1 hour. She had only 60 minutes to gather everything she would need to restart her life and save her sons. Moving quickly through the room, she separated basic clothes, documents, the little money she had managed to hide. Over the months. In the kitchen, she filled a bottle with water and grabbed some cereal bars. Memories from military training, where she learned the importance of staying hydrated and fed in stressful situations. In the office, she put away the printed documents and looked for anything that could serve as additional evidence. On an impulse, she opened Edward's personal safe. The combination was his mother's birth date. Inside, she found a brown envelope with the handwritten title, Contingency VR, her initials. The envelope contained disturbing documents: a forged will in her name, fabricated medical reports indicating suicidal tendencies, a prenuptial agreement she had never signed, transferring all her assets to Edward in case of death. The cold calculation of the plan made her stomach churn. Putting everything in the evidence folder, Victoria closed the makeshift suitcase. 50 minutes had passed. 10 minutes until the rescue arrived. It was then she heard the sound of tires at the mansion entrance. The sound of tires at the mansion entrance made Victoria's heart race. It couldn't be Michael's rescue. There were still 10 minutes left. It could only be Edward returning earlier than expected. Quickly, she pushed the suitcase under the bed and hid the document folder at the back of the bathroom towel cabinet. She sat in the room's armchair, picking up a random book from the bedside table, pretending tranquility while blood pulsed in her ears. Edward's firm footsteps echoed down the corridor. When he opened the bedroom door, his face was composed in a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed contained fury. "I see you're comfortably settled," he commented, his voice dangerously soft. "Enjoying the afternoon with a good book." Victoria swallowed hard, realizing too late that she was holding the book upside down. Edward noticed instantly, his smile transforming into a glacial expression. "What were you really doing, Victoria?" "Just resting. The doctor recommended rest for blood pressure." "Really?" He approached, snatching the book from her hands. "And since when do you read upside down? Do you think I'm an idiot?" "Edward, please, I'm pregnant. I need to stay calm." "Calm?" He violently threw the book against the wall, making her flinch. "You invade my privacy, record me without consent, threaten my reputation, and now you want to talk about calm." Victoria stood up, instinctively protecting her belly with her hands. She needed to buy time until Michael's rescue arrived. "We can talk about this civilly. You're right, I was wrong to be suspicious. Too late for manipulations, darling. I was always the manipulator in this relationship, remember?" Edward walked to the window, observing the mansion gardens. "Sophia is nervous. She thinks you might cause problems. I told her not to worry, that you don't have the capacity or the resources to pose a real threat." Victoria remained silent, avoiding any provocation. Every minute gained was precious now. "However," he continued, "as a precaution, I've decided to accelerate our plans. A private clinic in Switzerland, absolute discretion. You'll stay there until the baby is born. After that, well, accidents happen, don't they?" The explicit cruelty shocked Victoria, even knowing Edward's true face. It was one thing to hear his plans through a door, quite another to see him announce her planned death with the same casualness with which he would discuss the dinner menu. "Why are you telling me this? Aren't you afraid I'll report you?" Edward laughed, a humorless sound. "To whom, Victoria? The police? With what proof? Your word against mine, the word of an emotionally unstable pregnant woman, against a respected businessman, philanthropist, member of 3 boards of directors." He approached again, touching her face in a false caress. "Besides, you won't be in a position to report anyone. The private jet is ready. We leave tonight." Panic threatened to consume her. Tonight. There wasn't enough time. Michael's rescue would arrive in minutes, but Edward was already here, planning to take her away immediately. I need to get ready. Pack my bags." "I've already arranged everything. New documents, clothes appropriate for the Swiss climate. You won't need anything from here." He was eliminating evidence, methodically, erasing her existence. "At least let me change before we go. I can't travel like this." Victoria gestured to the loose dress she was wearing. Edward checked his watch, impatient. 5 minutes, not a second more. He left the room, leaving the door ajar, a silent reminder that he didn't trust her. Victoria heard him instruct one of the security guards to remain in the corridor. With trembling hands, she opened the closet, pretending to choose clothes while trying to think of an escape. The window? They were on the 2nd floor, a potentially fatal fall for her and the baby. The phone, certainly monitored. The only hope was Michael's rescue, but how would she get out with Edward and security guards watching her every move? Suddenly, she remembered something she had learned during military training. Sometimes, the best hiding place is the most obvious. She took out her secret phone and hid it inside her bra against her body. Then, discreetly, she removed the document folder from the towel cabinet and hid it under a decorative cushion in the armchair. She changed quickly, putting on a more comfortable travel dress and a light coat. As she put on a pair of flats, she heard a distant sound she recognized immediately. A helicopter approaching. Michael. It had to be him. The rescue wouldn't come by car, but by helicopter, much more efficient for overcoming London's chaotic traffic. Edward heard it too. His hurried footsteps returned to the room, his face a mask of suspicion. "Who did you call?" he demanded, grabbing her arm. "No one. How could I? You monitor all my contacts." The helicopter approached closer, the sound of the blades becoming deafening. Edward dragged Victoria to the window, watching the sky. The military helicopter hovered over the property, its lights cutting through the twilight. "Damn you!" Edward threw her against the wall with force, making her hit her head. "Who did you contact? How?" Victoria felt a trickle of blood run down her temple, but she stood firm. She would not show weakness now. "You forgot who I was before we met, Edward. A military nurse. I have friends you never knew." His expression transformed into pure fury. He grabbed her arm again, dragging her down the corridor to the stairs. "It doesn't matter. They can't come in without a warrant until they get one. We'll be far from here." In the entrance hall, 3 security guards waited, weapons displayed. Edward quickly instructed them, "Keep that helicopter away. Use the private property invasion protocol. I'm taking my wife out the back." Victoria stumbled as he dragged her through the kitchen to the garage. Her secret phone vibrated against her skin, probably Michael trying to contact her. Edward, however, was so focused on escaping that he didn't notice. In the garage, instead of the usual Audi, was a black SUV with armored windows. Edward violently pushed her into the passenger seat, fastening her seatbelt as if she were a disobedient child. "Edward, please," she tried one last time. "Think about our son. It doesn't have to be like this." "Shut up!" He started the engine with a roar. "This is your fault. We had a perfect arrangement. You would have everything you needed. Comfort, status, luxury. You just had to do one thing, obey." As the SUV sped out of the mansion's service entrance, Victoria saw in the rearview mirror the helicopter landing on the main lawn. Men in military uniforms disembarked quickly, confronting Edward's security guards. Too late. They were leaving the property, entering the tree-lined streets of Kensington. Edward drove like a madman, ignoring red lights, almost hitting a delivery driver who was crossing the street. Victoria felt a painful contraction and groaned, doubling over her belly. Edward didn't even look at her, focused on escaping. "If you lose this baby now, I swear I'll leave you bleeding on the side of the road," he threatened, turning sharply onto a side street. With effort, Victoria managed to discreetly remove her phone from its hiding place. Keeping it concealed against her body, she typed a quick message to Michael. "Black SUV JKL 4721. South. Exit of Kensington, help." She wasn't sure if the message would be sent. The signal might be weak, the battery might be dying, but it was her only hope. Edward continued driving fiercely, heading down Regent Street towards the M4 motorway. The rain began to fall, first a few scattered drops, then quickly turning into a downpour. "Perfect," Edward murmured, a sinister smile forming on his lips. "In this weather, no helicopter can follow us." Victoria's phone vibrated, a reply from Michael. "Located, hold on, blockade at Tower Bridge." Tower Bridge. That's where Edward was heading, trying to cross the River Thames to access the motorway leading to the airport. If Michael could block the bridge, they would have a chance. "Where are we going?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "London City Airport. The jet is waiting." Edward checked the rearview mirror nervously. "Your military friends can't do anything. They have no jurisdiction, no warrants, no evidence." "I have the recording, Edward. I sent it to several people." "Lie!" He slammed the steering wheel forcefully. "You didn't record anything. You're bluffing." Victoria didn't answer. She let doubt gnaw at him. It was the only advantage she had, at the moment. The rain intensified, turning the already chaotic M4 motorway traffic into a living hell. Horns blared incessantly. Frustrated drivers tried to inch forward through the congestion. "Damn it!" Edward punched the steering wheel again, seeing the line of cars ahead of them. "We're getting out of here." He turned sharply, cutting across 3 lanes at once, ignoring the shouts and honks of other drivers. He took an unplanned exit, driving through residential neighborhoods towards an alternative route. "They won't catch us," he muttered, more to himself than to Victoria. "Not after everything I've built." The SUV sped. Through the narrow streets of a neighborhood Victoria didn't recognize. The rain turned everything into indistinct shadows. A new set of contractions made her groan, stronger, more worrying. "Edward, I need a doctor. The baby." "Shut up. You'll have doctors when we get to Switzerland." We won't get to Switzerland if I go into labor here. The mention of the possibility made Edward hesitate. His son, his heir, the only part of Victoria he truly valued, could be at risk. You'll hold on until the airport. There's a medical team on the jet. A police car appeared. Behind them, siren blaring. Edward cursed, speeding up even more, turning onto a side street. Michael, Victoria whispered, recognizing the coordinated action. Her former superior had alerted the local police. Your damned plan won't work, Edward hissed, his face contorted in hatred. I have contacts in the police too. One call and that patrol car will disappear. He picked up his phone, dialing quickly as he drove. Victoria took advantage of the momentary distraction to unfasten her seatbelt, preparing for any escape opportunity. The patrol car continued in hot pursuit, now accompanied by a second one. Edward screamed into the phone, demanding help from some contact in the security forces. As they approached a roundabout, Victoria saw her chance. Edward would have to slow down, even if briefly. Her plan was risky, potentially fatal for her and the baby, but staying with Edward would certainly result in death. The SUV slowed down as it entered the roundabout. In a quick movement, Victoria opened the passenger door and threw herself out, rolling onto the wet road. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. She felt the asphalt scrape her skin, stones cut her arms, the rainwater mixing with her blood. But maternal instinct propelled her. She protected her belly with her arms during the fall, absorbing the impact with the rest of her body. Edward braked sharply, skidding on the wet road. Police cars immediately surrounded him, blocking any attempt at escape. Victoria lay in the rain, feeling the water wash the blood from her wounds. Some compassionate driver stopped, covering her with an umbrella, asking if she was okay. She couldn't answer, focused only on feeling if the baby was still moving. A gentle kick in her womb confirmed that yes, he was alive. Police officers forcibly removed Edward from the SUV, handcuffing him as he shouted threats and accusations. Amidst the confusion, a new sound cut through the air. The military helicopter approached, landing on a nearby school football field. Paramedics rushed to Victoria, quickly assessing her injuries. Michael appeared next, his military uniform soaked by the rain, his face a mask of professional concern. Victoria, you held on, soldier. We're here now. Michael, her voice was just a whisper. The baby. Check the baby. The medical team is already arriving. We'll take you to the Royal London Hospital immediately. As they placed her on a stretcher, Victoria saw Edward being led to a police car. Their eyes met, his full of hatred, hers of a newfound determination. This isn't over, he articulated silently, before being pushed into the vehicle. Yes, it is, she replied, though he couldn't hear her. In the helicopter, the medical team worked frantically to stabilize her. An obstetrician checked the baby's vital signs with a portable ultrasound machine. Stable heartbeats. The baby seems fine considering the circumstances, the doctor informed her. But we need to get to the hospital quickly. There are signs of premature placental abruption. Michael held her hand throughout. The flight, a comforting presence amidst the chaos. How did you find me? She asked, her voice weak due to the oxygen mask. We tracked your phone as soon as we received your message. When we realized he was taking you towards the airport, we alerted the federal police. There was a private jet with a flight plan to Zurich registered in his name. Everything clicked. Victoria nodded slightly, too exhausted to speak more. The painkillers began to take effect, dulling the pain of her injuries and contractions. The helicopter landed on the helipad of the Royal London Hospital. Complete medical team awaited, including obstetricians and surgeons. Victoria was quickly transferred to a hospital stretcher and taken inside, Michael accompanying her as far as he was allowed. I'll be here when you wake up, he promised, as the doctors took her to the operating room. The next few hours were a blur of medical procedures, technical voices discussing her case, monitors beeping. At some point, Victoria realized she was being prepared for an emergency C-section. The trauma of the fall had accelerated the labor process, and the baby showed signs of distress. We're going to start the C-section. Now, Miss Maxwell, the obstetrician informed her. The anesthesia is already taking effect. Don't worry, we'll do everything to protect your baby. Rivers, she corrected weakly. My name is Victoria Rivers. I'm no longer a Maxwell. Under the intense lights of the operating room, as the doctors worked to bring her son into the world, Victoria felt a strange sense of peace. After 2 years living in fear, she was finally free. Whatever the future held, she would face it with the courage she had forgotten she possessed. The sound of a baby crying filled the room. Strong, healthy, defiant. Her son was born against all odds, surviving the literal and metaphorical storm that marked his arrival into the world. It's a boy, the obstetrician announced, lifting the newborn for her to see him. A fighter, like his mother. Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she watched her son, small, red, perfect. A new life she would protect at all costs. Matthew, she whispered. His name is Matthew. The name meant gift of God, and he truly was a gift after everything she had faced. When the doctors took Matthew for his first care, Victoria finally allowed herself to rest. Her last conscious thought was that, for the first time in years, she could sleep without fear. She woke up hours later in a private hospital room. The sky beyond the window showed the first rays of dawn. Beside her bed, in a hospital bassinet, Matthew slept peacefully, small and quiet. Michael was sitting in a nearby armchair, flipping through documents. Noticing she had woken up, he approached with a relieved smile. Welcome back, warrior. Matthew? He's perfect. 7 pounds, 1 ounce, all tests normal. The doctors are impressed with the resilience of both of you. Victoria reached out to touch her son, feeling the soft skin of his cheek. It was real. They were safe. And Edward? Michael's expression turned serious. Detained by the federal police. The charges are serious. Attempted kidnapping, assault, coercion, in addition to evidence of financial fraud that emerged when authorities began investigating his accounts. He hesitated. But Victoria, I need to be honest. He has powerful connections. He's already hired a team of elite lawyers, and they're trying to discredit your testimony. The recording, it's our strongest evidence, but they'll claim it was obtained illegally. We'll need more. Victoria thought of the documents she had collected, the folder hidden in the mansion. There's evidence at the house, documents, emails, a forged will in my name. We obtained a search warrant for the property as soon as you were hospitalized. We found the folder exactly where you described in your message. The contents are being analyzed by investigators. An immense weight seemed to be lifted from Victoria's shoulders. She was not alone in this battle. Thank you, Michael. I don't know how to repay you. Don't thank me. You were one of the best nurses in our unit. You saved dozens of... I lives in Haiti. We're just returning the favor. Matthew woke up, stirring restlessly in his bassinet. Victoria tried to sit up to pick him up, but the pain from her C-section stitches prevented her. Michael gently lifted the baby, handing him into his mother's arms. He's beautiful, Michael commented, observing the newborn with admiration. He has your eyes. Victoria kissed her son's forehead, inhaling his unique baby scent. He is my strength now. For him, I'll face whatever it takes. Michael nodded, understanding. You won't be alone. The army takes care of its own. I've arranged 24-hour protection for both of you, at least until Edward is formally indicted and the legal situation stabilizes. And then, where will we go? One step at a time, soldier. First, recover. Then, we'll plan the future. As Matthew fell asleep again in her arms, Victoria allowed herself to consider this future, uncertain, challenging, but hers to shape, without the shadows of manipulation and fear that had dominated the past few years. Outside the hospital window, the London sky cleared completely, the previous night's storm giving way to a surprisingly clean and clear day. A new beginning, Victoria thought, for her and for Matthew. 6 weeks after Matthew's birth, Victoria faced a new battle, this time in the London courts. The grand auditorium of the Old Bailey Criminal Court was packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, and even protesters from domestic violence movements gathered to follow the preliminary hearing of the case the media had dubbed The Tycoon and the Nurse. Victoria entered, escorted by 2 army officers wearing a simple navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a discreet bun. Her transformation was remarkable, no longer the submissive, terrified wife, but a woman with an upright posture, a direct and determined gaze. In her arms, Matthew slept peacefully, oblivious to the tumult his mere existence had unleashed. On the other side of the courtroom, Edward Maxwell presented a carefully constructed image of a respectable businessman unjustly accused. Impeccable suit, confident posture, surrounded by a team of 5 top-tier lawyers. His gaze met Victoria's only once, cold, calculating, silently promising that the war was far from over. "All rise for the entrance of Her Honor, Judge Eleanor Vance," announced the court officer. The judge, a middle-aged black woman known for her unwavering integrity, entered the room with a severe expression. After the initial procedures, the prosecution presented the formal charges: attempted false imprisonment, domestic violence, assault, coercion, document forgery, financial fraud, and, most gravely, conspiracy to murder. Edward's lead counsel immediately rose. "Your Honor, the accusations against my client are absurd, based on illegally obtained evidence and the testimony of a woman clearly unbalanced by postpartum. Mr. Maxwell is an exemplary citizen who built one of the country's largest technology companies, generating thousands of jobs. This is an extortion attempt disguised as a criminal prosecution." Victoria observed the performance with a calm that surprised even herself. Where there would once have been fear, now there was only the certainty that the truth, however painful and dirty, needed to come to light. The prosecutor, Sarah Jenkins, a specialist in crimes against women, presented the recording Victoria made in Sophia's apartment, along with the documents found in the mansion: the forged will, the fabricated medical reports, the emails exchanged with doctors in Switzerland discussing discreet procedures. "Your Honor," the prosecutor argued, "we are not dealing with a common case of domestic violence, but a meticulously orchestrated plan to eliminate the victim after the birth of her child, appropriating not only her personal fortune, but also building a public narrative of a dedicated widowed father that would further increase his social prestige." Edward's defense counterattacked, questioning the legality of the recording and Victoria's mental sanity. "My client was merely expressing concern for his wife's mental health, who showed signs of depression and paranoia during pregnancy. The trip to Switzerland was for specialized psychiatric treatment, not for any illicit procedure." While the lawyers debated, Matthew woke up, his eyes, identical to his mother's, observing the environment with curiosity. Victoria adjusted him better in her arms, aware that many eyes in the courtroom turned to the baby. The contrast between the child's innocence and the sordidness of the accusations being discussed created a palpable tension in the room. Judge Vance, after hearing the initial arguments, announced, "Considering the gravity of the accusations and the preliminary evidence, I rule that the defendant Edward Maxwell shall remain in preventive detention until trial. As for the recording contested by the defense, it will be submitted for technical expert analysis to verify its authenticity and admissibility." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Edward, who clearly expected to be released on bail, visibly paled. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I grant a protective order in favor of Victoria Rivers and her son, prohibiting any form of contact by the defendant or intermediaries. Provisional custody of the child remains exclusively with the mother." The hearing was adjourned, and Victoria, escorted by Michael and other military personnel, headed for the back exit of the courthouse to avoid the press. In the corridor, however, a familiar figure waited: Sophia Preston, Edward's mistress, elegant even in her evident discomfort. "Can I speak with you alone?" she asked, casting nervous glances at the military personnel surrounding Victoria. Michael looked interrogatively at Victoria, who nodded. "5 minutes, I'll be right there in sight." When they were relatively alone, Sophia spoke in a low, urgent voice. "I'm not here to defend Edward. I came because I was also deceived." "Deceived? You knew exactly what he was planning. It was on the recording." Sophia closed her eyes briefly as if gathering courage. Yes, I knew, and I have no excuses for my role in it. But what you don't know is that I wasn't the first. There were others before you. Victoria felt a shiver run down her spine. Others? What do you mean? His first wife didn't die in a car accident, as everyone thinks. I have documents, evidence I found in his private files, documents the police should see. Why are you telling me this now? Why would you help incriminate him? Sophia laughed humorlessly, a bitter sound. Because I found out I'm just next on the list. When you escaped, he needed a new plan. Guess who would be the new devoted widow to care for his son? With the difference that this time, the inheritance would be even greater, including everything he tried to take from you. The shock must have been evident on Victoria's face, for Sophia continued even more urgently. I'm not asking for forgiveness or immunity. I deserve to pay for what I did. But he needs to be stopped permanently. Michael approached, indicating that time was up. Sophia discreetly handed a USB drive to Victoria. Everything is here. Files, transactions, conversation records. I've confirmed the authenticity of each document. Victoria held the small device, feeling its symbolic weight. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Verify everything, but do it quickly. He has resources and allies you can't even imagine. With those words, Sophia walked away, disappearing, down the courthouse corridor before Victoria could ask more questions. In the official car that took them back to the military base where they were temporarily housed, Victoria told Michael about the encounter and showed him the USB drive. It could be a trap, he warned, examining the device with suspicion. We need to check this carefully. If it's true that there were other victims before me, it will change the dynamic of the case completely. But first, let's confirm the authenticity. That night, while Matthew slept in his makeshift bassinet in the officers' quarters, Victoria and Michael, along with a team of Army IT specialists and 2 federal police investigators, meticulously examined the files provided by Sophia. The content was devastating, bank records showing suspicious transfers after the death of Edward's first wife, Helen Campbell, supposedly a victim of a car accident in 2018. Original medical reports that contradicted the official version of the cause of death. Emails exchanged with a forensic pathologist who was later promoted to a public position through Edward's influence. This explains why he was so methodically controlling, Victoria murmured as she read the documents. It wasn't his first time. He perfected the method. The federal investigators photographed each document, creating an official record of the evidence. One of them, Detective Inspector Reynolds, commented, "With this, we can reopen the first wife's case. And if this pattern was established before, there could be other victims we don't even know about," Michael completed, his expression grave. The next morning, the federal police conducted simultaneous searches on 3 of Edward's properties, the mansion in Kensington, his company office, and a farm in rural Oxfordshire. The results were beyond expectations. A hidden safe on the farm contained not only additional incriminating documents, but also recording devices similar to those installed in the mansion where Victoria lived. The case gained national proportions. The press, which initially portrayed the conflict as a marital dispute where both sides had their version, began to present Edward as a possible serial predator who used his position and influence to attract, isolate, and eventually eliminate women in exchange for financial gain. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, Sophia Preston was found in her apartment, unconscious after an apparent suicide attempt. A note beside her body detailed her participation in Edward's crimes and expressed remorse for the actions she had taken out of ambition and emotional blindness. Saved by paramedics called by a neighbor, Sophia was hospitalized in serious but stable condition. The incident immediately raised suspicions of an attempted silencing. Edward, even from prison, still maintained powerful contacts. Security around Victoria and Matthew was reinforced, and the justice system accelerated the case proceedings. 3 months after Matthew's birth, on a sunny October morning, Victoria attended Edward's trial, now including the charges related to the death of his first wife. The courtroom was even more crowded than at the preliminary hearing, with the additional presence of relatives of Helen Campbell, the first victim, who, had spent years believing the accident version. Edward, who during the preliminary hearing had maintained a facade of indignant dignity, now showed visible signs of stress, deep, dark circles under his eyes, tense posture, a nervous tic in the corner of his left eye. His team of lawyers, once confident and aggressive, seemed uncomfortable, especially after two of them resigned from the case the previous week, citing ethical conflicts. Judge Vance opened the session with a severe expression. This court will today assess not only the crimes against Victoria Rivers, but also the new evidence related to the case of Helen Campbell Maxwell, reopened after significant discoveries. Over the next 8 hours, the court heard devastating testimonies. Helen's mother describing how her daughter gradually isolated herself after marriage, a former mansion security guard reporting Edward's controlling behaviors, doctors who treated Victoria documenting injuries consistent with physical assaults, financial experts detailing how Edward manipulated accounts and transfers. The most impactful moment, however, was when Victoria took the witness stand, Matthew in her arms. "Ms. Rivers," Prosecutor Jenkins began, "could you describe to the court how you met the defendant?" In a clear and firm voice, Victoria narrated her story, the seemingly casual encounter, which she later discovered was carefully orchestrated after Edward investigated her background and financial situation. The intense and rapid romance, the gradual isolation, the control that increased day by day, the discovery of her pregnancy, and the subsequent change in his behavior, and finally the terrible discovery of his plans. "He didn't see me as a wife, a partner, or even a human being," she concluded, looking directly at Edward for the first time. "I was just an instrument, a means to obtain social status, access to my family inheritance, and finally, a child he could mold in his image without the interference of a mother." Edward's lawyer tried during cross-examination to paint Victoria as emotionally unstable, suggesting that pregnancy had exacerbated paranoid tendencies. "Isn't it true that you were always possessive, Ms. Rivers? That you monitored my client's communications, invaded his privacy, and finally forged evidence when you realized the marriage was ending?" Victoria smiled slightly, a gesture that caught the lawyer off guard. "Doctor, I spent 3 years as a military nurse serving in conflict zones. I treated war wounds, witnessed deaths, faced epidemics in Haiti. Do you really believe I would invent conspiracies out of marital insecurity? I didn't need to forge evidence. Your client left a trail so clear that even a law intern could follow it." A murmur of approval ran through the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge. The trial extended for 5 days. On the last day, after deliberations that lasted only 4 hours, a surprisingly short time for such a complex case, the jury returned with the verdict: guilty on all counts. Judge Vance, in pronouncing the sentence, was implacable. "Edward Maxwell, you used your intelligence, resources, and social position not to contribute positively to society, but to devise predatory schemes targeting vulnerable women. Your crimes were not impulsive, but meticulously planned, revealing a coldness and capacity for manipulation rarely seen in this court." The sentence was the maximum provided by law: 30 years of imprisonment in a maximum security prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years, in addition to the obligation to compensate the victims' families and the forfeiture of shareholdings in his companies. When the court officers led Edward out of the courtroom, he briefly turned to Victoria, his gaze a mixture of hatred and disbelief, the incredulity of a predator, who for the first time encountered prey that not only survived but defeated him at his own game. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by journalists, Victoria made a brief statement. "Today I celebrate not the conviction of a man, but the validation of a truth that many women know intimately: that abuse can wear sophisticated masks, that it can hide behind charming smiles and expensive gifts. This victory is not just mine or Helen's family's. It is for all women who were ever silenced, manipulated, or made to doubt their own sanity." The following months brought different challenges. With the criminal process concluded, the battle for Edward's estate began. His companies, once valued in billions, now faced an exodus of investors and clients. Maxwell Tech especially suffered from the irony of its specialty, security software, having been used by its own CEO to monitor and control his victims. Victoria, as Matthew's mother, had a legal right to a significant part of the estate. However, she made a decision that surprised many. She refused any participation in the companies or properties, accepting only child support for her son and the transfer of assets that were originally hers, blocked by Edward during the marriage. "I don't want anything built with that money," she explained to Michael, as they prepared to leave the military quarters that had been her refuge for almost 6 months. "I prefer to start from scratch." Michael, who throughout the process had transformed from former superior to close friend and eventual confidant, observed with admiration Victoria's metamorphosis. From the traumatized woman he had rescued on a stormy night to this determined figure who now made plans for the future. "Where will you go? Back to your apartment in London?" Victoria shook her head, adjusting Matthew in his stroller while organizing the few possessions they had accumulated. "No, too many memories, too many ghosts. I'm thinking of Brighton on the south coast. I have a small house there inherited from my parents. A quiet place, good for raising a child." "And what about your career? Will you go back to nursing?" A genuine smile lit up Victoria's face, an expression that became more frequent as the months passed. "Yes, but in a different way. During the process, I met so many women in similar situations. I realized there's a desperate need for healthcare professionals who understand the trauma of abuse, who know how to recognize the signs." She paused, stroking Matthew's hair, who had fallen asleep in the stroller. "I'm thinking of specializing in psychological trauma, maybe opening a clinic focused on victims of domestic violence." Michael nodded, approving the idea. "You'd be excellent at that. Practical experience and genuine empathy, a rare combination." As they carried the bags to the car that would take them to the airport, Victoria insisted on taking a commercial flight to Brighton, refusing the offer of military transport. One last surprise awaited. In the base courtyard, dozens of military personnel, including nurses and doctors who had served with Victoria in Haiti, formed 2 parallel lines. When she appeared with Matthew, they saluted in unison, a rare demonstration of respect usually offered only to hierarchical superiors. Moved, Victoria walked among them, recognizing familiar faces, receiving words of support and admiration. At the end of the line, an unexpected figure waited, Louisa, her cousin, who was supposedly in Manchester. "Louisa? How—" The 2 women embraced intensely, tears flowing freely. "Michael found me," Louisa explained. "Edward really offered me that job to keep us apart, but he never knew we kept secret contact." She leaned in to see Matthew smiling at the sleeping baby. "He's beautiful, Victoria. The spitting image of his mother, thank goodness." Michael approached, carrying the last bag. "Your flight leaves in 2 hours. We should go." At the airport, while waiting for boarding, Michael finally expressed what he had been considering for weeks. "Victoria, I know you need this new beginning, this space to heal, but I'd like you to know that you're not alone. That if you need anything, professionally or—" He hesitated. "Personally, I'm here." She watched him attentively. The man who had coordinated her rescue, who had stood by her during the trial, who had helped her navigate the legal and emotional complexities of the past few months. Unlike Edward, Michael had never tried to control or diminish her. On the contrary, he had always treated her as an equal, respecting her decisions even when he disagreed. "Thank you, Michael. It means a lot to me." She briefly took his hand, a simple but significant contact. "Once I'm settled in Brighton, once Matthew and I have found our rhythm, perhaps you could visit us." "I'd love that." The boarding announcement interrupted the moment. With a final exchange of glances, full of unverbalized possibilities, Victoria picked up Matthew and headed for the gate, Louisa by her side. 6 months later, a discreet clinic opened its doors on Brighton Beach in Brighton. "Phoenix Recovery Center," announced the simple sign at the entrance. The name chosen by Victoria represented exactly what they offered, a space for rebirth after trauma. The clinic, partially funded by the settlement from the lawsuit and partially by NGOs dedicated to combating domestic violence, offered specialized medical and psychological care for vulnerable women. The team, small but dedicated, included psychologists, social workers, lawyers, and nurses, many of them survivors of abuse. Victoria, now specializing in trauma psychology, divided her time between clinical care and lectures at hospitals, police stations, and schools, teaching how to identify early signs of abusive relationships. One March afternoon, as Victoria watched Matthew, now 1 year old, playing on the sand of the beach in front of her house, a familiar sound cut through the sky. The military helicopter bringing Michael for his monthly visit. He landed in the open field adjacent to the property, an area Victoria had adapted, specifically for these visits. As he descended from the aircraft, Michael carried a gift for Matthew, a small handmade wooden helicopter. "How are my favorite survivors?" he asked, approaching with a smile that, in recent months, had become more frequent and less formal. Matthew, recognizing the visitor, ran awkwardly towards him, arms outstretched to be picked up, a ritual that had naturally established itself between them. Michael picked up the boy, spinning him in the air as he laughed uncontrollably. Victoria watched the scene with quiet contentment. The journey from that stormy night in Kensington to this peaceful moment in Brighton had been arduous, marked by physical and emotional pains that still occasionally manifested in nightmares or moments of sudden anxiety. But here, with the open sea before her and a boundless sky above, feeling the salty breeze on her face, Victoria Rivers finally knew what it was to be truly free, not just from the literal prison her marriage had become, but from the inner prison of doubt and fear that Edward had meticulously built in her mind. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, approaching with Matthew in his arms. "About how life comes full circle." She smiled, accepting the hand he offered. "About how sometimes we need to get completely lost to find who we truly are." Together, the three walked along the beach, leaving small footprints in the sand that would soon be erased by the rising tide, a reminder of the impermanence of the past and the constant possibility of new beginnings. In the distance, the military helicopter waited, no longer a symbol of emergency rescue, but of connection, of possibilities, of a future that, for the first time in many years, Victoria felt truly free to choose.